Hello everyone, I'm Fuchsia.
And I'm Jamie.
And we are That Thing
Called Inclusion.
We will have a theme tune eventually. So, today's episode is about Star Wars. Dun,
Dun, dun, dun, dun, dun, dun, dun,
Right.
dun, dun. Oh, by
We're
myself.
gonna get copyrighted. Now, you're probably thinking, Fuchsia, Jamie, why are you talking about Star Wars when this entire podcast is meant to be about workplace inclusion and what it's like to navigate the working world as a disabled person? Well, let me tell you, Star Wars actually has a great representation of what it's like to be a disabled person working in a universe. Bear with me. Now, if you've not ever seen Star Wars, switch off now, go and see Star Wars, and then come back to this episode. But if you have seen Star Wars in any capacity, whether it's the old films, the prequels, the new ones, the animes, the cartoons on Disney Plus, whatever, you will understand what we're talking about. And Star Wars and inclusion and workplace inclusion are twinned. And here's why. In the Star Wars universe, it doesn't matter who you are or what disability you have, you are included. And here's why. Yoda has a floating wheelchair. Anakin's stepfather has a floating wheelchair. Anakin himself, when he becomes Darth Vader, has a limb difference. Now, I do need to put this as a caveat that we're not talking about actors playing disabled people in the Star Wars universe. That's a whole different conversation. What we're talking about is disability representation within the Star Wars universe. If we're brave enough, we might talk about how non-disabled actors are playing disabled people within the Star Wars universe, but that is a whole different conversation for a different time. What we're talking about is representation within a universe. So when I first watched Star Wars, when I was a child, I obviously saw that there was certain different things that were happening. Now, obviously, I was a child, so I didn't really understand. Luke got his hand cut off. He got a new hand. He had a limb difference automatically. Didn't stop him being a Jedi, and it actually happened to be his fighting hand as well. So that was a massive thing. But later on in life, when I saw the prequels, which is obviously now 1, 2, and 3, there was a lot of disability representation. So obviously, like I just said, Yoda was in a floating wheelchair. Now, Yoda at the time was like 900 years old, wasn't he, Jamie, at this point?
He wasn't dead, yeah. Like 900, 800,
Yeah, so he was an old dude. Now, maybe not for his species, but he was an old dude. And he was in a floating wheelchair. And he was wandering around in his wheelchair, but obviously he was still kick-ass, and that was great. Anakin got his hand cut off, so he became limb difference, and they grew back his hand. Well, didn't grow back his hand, but they fixed a mechanical hand on, and they grew back the skin, which was amazing. And also at the same time, they have these things called Bacter Tanks. Now, this is where I wanted to get into why, this is really important in disability. So Star Wars has this medical system called Bacter Tanks, which is meant to cure you of any ill. So if you get shot, it will cure the shot. If you're sick, it will cure the sickness. If you've got internal bleeding or whatever, it will cure. But what it doesn't do is change your disability. It will not grow back a limb. It will not give you back your sight. And it certainly won't heal your skin to the extent where you will still have visible scars. And that's really important. It doesn't take away the disability from someone or the impairment or the visible scarring off of someone. It will heal you, but it will not change the essence of who you are, which is your disability. And you're still thinking, Fuchsia, what has this got to do with work? Why are you still talking about Star Wars? What's going on here? Well, if you don't know Star Wars, you will know the Death Star. Everyone knows what the Death Star is. Your nanny knows what the Death Star is, right? Now, if you think of the Death Star, it's the most inclusive workplace that you could possibly imagine because it has ramps. It has staircases, but it has ramps. It has lifts. And Jamie, what did you tell me the other day about these lifts?
So there's no button, so you don't have to go out and press a button. You literally go up this lift, the door is open, voila, and step in and tell it what floor you want to get on. So there's no, does this building have wheelchair accessibility, or can I get up to the next floor? Is your lift working?
Nope, you just rock up to the doors, you let yourself in, you go up to the floor. That is it. And there's ramps everywhere. And there's no carpets. You can wheel yourself around. Now, obviously, if you're on crutches or, you don't walk great, the surfaces are shiny, so that might be a bit of an issue. But you'd like to think that they thought about shoes in this universe. That means that you're not going to slip over. But also, at the same time, it's great for visually impaired people as well, isn't it, Jamie? Because there is tactile walls and you can feel yourself around. And also within the Star Wars universe, they do have certain implants to help you see, but they won't cue your sight, but you can use certain things to help you see. So you could be completely blind but have these goggles that would help you see, right? So in the Star Wars universe, you could be disabled. They won't cure you of your disability. You have a disability. But what they did was they made life easier for you. And the biggest thing was that everyone in the Star Wars universe, no matter their disability, had a bloody job, right? Darth Vader was a Sith Lord. He didn't have limbs. And he had I guess we could equate it to having COVID with glass lung. I mean, he couldn't breathe because his lungs were burnt from, spoiler alert. Is it too late to do a spoiler alert?
I
Considering
think we're okay. 10 years plus, surely.
he's been out for like 40 years now. Spoiler alert, Darth Vader can't breathe. But the biggest thing is with Darth Vader is he's in a lot of pain. So he has this mechanism within his helmet to give him pain relief. And without that pain relief, without that helmet, he can't function. And for multiple different reasons, that's why he dies. We won't talk about the fireworks and the lightning that's caused his death, but
breaks my heart.
It's awful. I mean, I'm a Sith Lord. You're a fallen Jedi. It's really difficult to see our Lord and Master fall like that,
especially for me.
But the biggest thing in the Star Wars universe is that no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, no matter what disability you have or impairment you have, you're actually included in the society. Now, yes, of course, there's light side and dark side, and there is a predominance that people on the dark side do have more disabilities than people on the light side, but that's always been a thing in society anyway. But there's no shying away from physical disabilities. I mean, Palpatine obviously has a lot of facial deformities, and that's shown, rightly or wrongly, but that he doesn't try and heal himself. He doesn't just try and change his outlook because that's who he is now. It's like, oh, this is my face now. This is who I am. Especially with like Darth Vader, they tried to build him up to be a more physical representation of himself, but he's still disabled. I mean, he still needs help, and he still needs to be medically sorted every so often, and obviously especially having this pain medication that comes through to him, a bit like Bane in the Batman movies, that. I mean, this isn't great because this is using like bad examples of like bad people with disabilities, but this is not what I'm getting at. It's like the whole world was designed for disabled people, if you think about it.
The whole galaxy is designed for them.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing. I mean, you love Yoda, and Yoda is elderly. He's of short stature. He's clearly faced quite a lot of battles which have left him scarred. But you were saying the other day how he actually uses a lot of mindfulness techniques, doesn't he?
He does indeed. Like if you listen to some of the quotes that Yoda uses, and one of my favorite ones that we're talking about disability and Star Wars and how the two kind of link. One of my favorite things about it is Yoda says, and this is a terrible impersonation, but I'm going to do it anyway. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. And for me, that's so true to life because if I think about my own journey with disability, and I'm sure yours is quite similar, where you kind of disclose things about your disability. And when you're younger and kind of struggling with it yourself, so I told people I have bad eyesight. Now, I'm registered blind, that's far from the truth, but that was my go to at the time. So I told them I had bad eyesight, and then I would say, I have bad eyesight, I need glasses, or I have really bad eyesight, I have a visual impairment. The right thing for me to actually be saying was, I have visual impairment and I am registered blind, but I didn't. I lessened what it was. And this saying that you have said, fear leads to anger, you come into these employments and you're fearful because how much do I give away? And if you're not giving away enough, then you're obviously going to encounter some challenges because if there's a problem that arises or you need some kind of assistive technology or if you need reasonable adjustments, you're going to encounter fear. And it's not just fear of the unknown, it's that fear that from previous experiences as well. And then if your employer, you have disclosed, say, that you need support and you're not getting it, that fear then turns down into an anger. And it's an anger, and not just your employer, but an anger at yourself. So your well-being, your mental health is starting to really take a dive here. And so you're going from fear leads to anger. Anger then leads to hate. Not that you become hateful, you just hate what's happening. You hate that you're in the situation again. You hate that this is what you're going through because you can't fix it. It's not all in your hands. You want to say, let's fix it in a magic marker and draw it again, but you can't do that. So that anger then turns into really to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. And that's it. Suffering. You suffer. And you suffer in silence typically. And when you do be brave and say to your employer, oh, I'm struggling with this, it doesn't always fall in the right ears and they don't want to know because they don't understand. And if they don't understand, only some of them want to take the time to understand. No, I've had managers who went away and looked at disability and tried to understand my disability, come back to me and ask questions. And I've people tell me, you should start smoking because it's bad for your back and your back's bad because of that. No, my back's bad because of my eyesight, constrained to see a computer.
Yeah.
Or you should get glasses, they will help you. Yes, because if I could wear glasses, I would be wearing them, but they're not going to make a difference to my life. So Yoda comes out with these quotes, and that's one of the most famous ones. But his whole concept of Yoda, the whole concept of Yoda is this being who's knowledgeable and is wise, and you know, we are the subject matter experts in our disability, so we're knowledgeable that way. Are we wise? Probably not, because we probably haven't tried every assistive technology. We probably haven't tried everything, but we want to. We want to improve our own accessibility. We want to make things easier for ourselves. And I think when it comes to mindfulness and mental health, we're not always the friendliest to ourselves. And you've spoken quite openly about the challenges you faced, and I faced many challenges too with mine, and it was just that insecurity and that just why me, why this again, and why was I not born like everybody else? But I think if we kind of come into our play now, Yoda, I'm Star Wars mad. Like honestly, my uncle Mark had me obsessed from a young age. I still have toys from it. I got my nephew obsessed with me, my brother. So my whole family is a bunch of Star Wars geeks, and we love it. But for me, I think that there's so many little lessons there from Yoda. This one person, and I actually have this little book from him. I know it's back to front because of the camera, but it's called "Be More Like Yoda." And in this book, I can't read it. My partner reads it to me. My partner buys me this stuff, and I can't read it, but he reads it for me, so it's okay. But those little quotes, they do a lot of things that I said are pick me ups, and I think the accessibility from Star Wars and the whole mental health piece and the wellness piece, there is takeaways from that, 100%.
Yeah, and the biggest thing, which is on Disney Plus, which I only tapped into last year, was a cartoon called The Bad Batch. And they are clones that are defective. And I'm saying that in air quotes, defective, because they're not like the other clones. And I'm so sorry if you haven't seen the Clone Wars or you do not understand what the Clone Wars were, but essentially, there was this whole army that were made from the DNA structure of a Mandalorian bounty hunter called Jango Fett, who was meant to be the purest form of a battle engine. He was bred organically himself from Mandalore. He's not a clone, but they cloned his DNA to make an entire army of exactly him. But like with any cloning, it goes wrong. and they made this whole cartoon, and it's called The Bad Batch, and these 5 clones have something wrong with them, in brackets, but they're not wrong. So their disabilities actually become the thing that makes them the greatest. So there's a sharpshooter, there is someone that's technically brilliant, there's someone that's a great leader, and they've all got disabilities, but they are considered defective by the rest of the clone army because they're different, but not by the Empire. The Empire considers them an elite unit because of their specialities, because of their disabilities. Now, we're not talking about right or wrong, we're not talking about light side or dark side here. We're just talking about the fact that these 5 people could have been terminated. They could have been euthanized. I mean, that has happened in the disabled world, that people have been euthanized because they have been deemed defective, and it still happens to this day with abortions. We won't go into that because that's a very heavily politicized subject, but there is a law going through at the moment that is trying to terminate pregnancies of Down syndrome people. It's an incredibly emotive, difficult subject, but it's something that disabled people have to face daily, that we are being genetically tested in the womb to make sure that we don't have disabilities. Yet in the Star Wars universe, there were these people that were genetically made to be perfect, but still, in the eyes of the people that made them, went wrong. And yet, they were the most elite unit because they were not complete clones of everyone else. And that is powerful. That is a really powerful thing. And I watched this as an adult, and this is a cartoon for children, right? And I was thinking, geez, if I was a disabled child and I watched Bad Batch as a child, knowing that I had a disability, I'd be like, yes, look, I am amazing. I'm superhuman. I can be anything I want to be. Just because I was made wrong, apparently, I can be whatever I want to be. I'm not going to be terminated. I'm going to be the best I can be. And that is so powerful. And I think people poo-poo sci-fi a lot. Like,
They
it's
do.
fantasy. It's not real. You can't live in that world. And yet sci-fi is the greatest advocate for disability representation of any TV genre that I've ever seen. That not only makes the disabled person powerful, but also gives them a story arc. You wouldn't get that in EastEnders unless it was a pandering thing. I mean, you wouldn't get that in a movie unless the person was in a wheelchair and then all of a sudden, oh, a miracle! Yay, they got healed, they can walk! Yay! You,
But
you don't you don't get that in Star Wars. You don't.
you don't, and like even in movies, for myself, who I don't use a wheelchair, so when I look at movies or TV shows, the representation is always the same thing. It's somebody in a wheelchair. It's the same when a company uses stockpile images. It's all stockpile images. The same image for a disabled person is somebody in a wheelchair in an
Someone in a
office
wheelchair.
who by the way, is in a wheelchair, but apparently don't need any other adjustments for the computer or
And the
anything. So
wheelchair
this
is
is a disabled
awful.
person. It's so outdated. It's like, okay, so you're going to have to pull yourself along this outdated wheelchair, which looks
Yeah.
like it's ready to fall apart. Like even when you look at the ethnicity stockpile photos, an ethnic diverse workplace is shown as people of the same ethnicity sitting in a room in an office. How is that diversity? Like, do you know what I mean? And I think when you talked about this TV show, The Bad Batch, I've heard of it. I go on to Disney Plus now. I always get sidetracked with Once Upon a Time because I love that TV show also. But with The Bad Batch, I love the empowerment of the empowerment of it, and it reminds me of AMS. And I know this isn't me kind of saying, "Oh, AMS is the best." Da da da. It's not a plug-in for this. It's just me saying that empowerment and being different is something that I've experienced, and only in the past 2 years, like 2 years ago, when I've done this. I think I said that in the first episode, and that empowerment of somebody saying, "We recognize your difference. There's value to this, and we can learn from it, and you can teach others." And they give you a spotlight to kind of break the barriers that you've experienced, or as you said, find that empowerment and recognize that, there's value in this, and you can do so much with it. And like as you said, this was a unique team who were seen above as everybody else. And I'm not saying disabled people are, because that's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is when you have historically people with non-disabilities designing things for disabled people, who have you spoken to design that? Because that's not accessible.
Yeah.
So who you design it? Or we want to be inclusive, and this is the word we're going to use, but the word on that job post is not inclusive at all, and it's written by somebody who doesn't have a disability. Like, I can
Yeah.
go on here. There's so many examples. The world is not designed for disabled
No,
people, but a galaxy in Star Wars is. So
totally
if
is.
if if George Lucas can sit down and say, I'm going to write the plot for this absolutely amazing, incredible journey, if he can do that, and thinking about accessibility in mind, as you said, the ramps, the lifts, even the lighting, like I've never seen a more lit up place than the Death Star. Like, take head cities, like light up your cities. It's terrible for me at night. But if he can think about that accessibility of a whole galaxy across different periods of time, why can't we today in society, having learned past experiences and are meant to be more inclusive, why can't we think and design with that 1%? And when we say design 1%, I know I rant and rave about this every episode, but it's stopping to think, who's this outreach to? Who's this going to be affecting? If you're messaging me, are you going to make that font bigger? If you're designing a building, make sure it's accessible. Make sure your lifts work, because I know so many people who use wheelchairs who have been told, sorry, our lift's out of service, so we're not accessible. Usually we are. If your lift's out of service for more than 24 hours, you're not accessible and you're making an excuse.
Yeah, and the amazing thing is, I mean, again about Star Wars, Obi-Wan Kenobi saw Princess Leia in a hologram saying, Obi-Wan Kenobi, help me, you're my only hope. I mean, she was physically there. I mean, could you imagine if she was also signing that to make it accessible? Now, obviously, there's so many different sign languages, of course, but it wasn't just like a written piece. Like, it
Yep.
wasn't just words. It was a physical person there, and even if you couldn't hear her words, you could see that she was in distress and she needed
Yeah.
help. And that was done in the 70s. Like, George Lucas thought, right, okay, we're not going to just have like a tablet with words that's going to be sent on a robot and the robot's just going to spit out this tablet or whatever, or the robot's just going to go
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi.
it's actually going to be a physical representation of a woman in distress going, help me. And yet in this day and age, we still can't do teleconferencing without it just being sound. And
But even that when you go onto it, when it's not just sound, when it's video, they don't have closed
they
captions.
don't have
You
closed
have to
captions.
you have to turn them on yourself. You need them, but you got to turn them on.
Yeah. And
Go figure.
and you can imagine in the Star Wars universe, yeah, okay, it wasn't represented in the movies that there was closed captioning, but you could imagine that there was, because everyone can understand everyone else's language,
Yeah.
because there's translation apps and people speak Basic, which is English, but then if they don't speak Basic, they were speaking another language and it was translated. I mean, that's an accessibility app straight there. And that was designed in the 70s by George Lucas. And yet still today in 2022, I could be sitting next to someone in a conference room and they can't speak English and I can't speak the language that they're speaking, and we cannot communicate.
Well, you can if you have a Google Translator on your phone, but it'll come out absolutely
It will come
terrible.
out absolutely terrible, and that's if you can use that, because in my disability, I'd have to type it, and I can't type it. I can't speak it because it will come out as gobbledygook anyway. It's just mind blowing. But what always enters my head is Darth Vader made the Death Star, and the Death Star was accessible because he was a disabled person building.
Preach it.
Albeit a thing that was going to blow up planets. Let's just ignore that for a second. Let's just ignore that he was trying to blow up planets or starships. He built something that was accessible with the lighting, the floors, the lifts, the ramps. Not necessarily the handrails, because it was a health and safety nightmare. There was no handrails anywhere, and there was no warning signs. But he built something that was accessible, and I don't think people actually think about that. And as a disabled people, that's what we think about. That's when we see movies and we see this going down, and this may have been a complete and bloody accident by the person that's creating this movie. But to disabled people, we're like, oh my god, why can't I have a lift that just opens doors without me having to like punch it in the face because it won't open? You know, it's just
Or my kids slap the wall. Where is this button? As you're trying to see
like
where it's
trying to
coming
find
from
where
the
it is,
floor.
and then you're constantly
Oh,
just slapping around trying to find the button.
or do you know when there's like four? You know when there's like you go into a lobby and there's like four lifts and you have to find where the ding sound comes from. To me, it's like a game of like guess who. So I'll stand in the foyer and be like, okay, so I can't see the button, and I press the both sides, and I stand like this and look around.
Where's the
And
ding?
usually I try. Somebody takes the lift before I can get into it, so somebody behind me will get into the lift if it's behind me and use it, and I'm like, I need to work wine with a guide dog or a sign that says I have a visual impairment. I'm disabled.
But Jamie, shouldn't you have super hearing because you're blind?
Well, apparently Daredevil did, and he didn't share that knowledge of anything.
Oh,
And you know,
I
like
hate that.
even then, even Daredevil, a superhero movie about a blind man, like I loved that movie growing up, and I know it's not is it sci-fi? I'd say it is a little bit. It is sci-fi, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah.
so anything superhero, surely. And like with Ben, what is that actor's name? Ben Affleck. He played this beautiful blind man who had these amazing powers, who was able to be a really successful lawyer by day, and at night he beat up criminals with a superhero, and his I think it was like he almost I don't know what it was, like radar, I don't know what he
It's like
used, but
bat signals. Well, not bat
like
signals. They did play bat.
it was yeah, it was a really bad representation. But in terms of the actual a disabled person as a superhero, that's insane for a young person. Because like again, why should I look at TV and see disability as a wheelchair? All you're doing is making me feel that I'm not disabled enough.
Yeah.
Am I disabled enough because I don't fit into what this is? But when I watch Daredevil or I watch Star Wars, and then you've this whole universe of people with different abilities, disabilities, and like there's a whole species, a whole planet. Now I think this is from the games of Star Wars, and there's a whole planet, and the whole species are force sensitive to the blind.
Yeah,
They
they're
see through the
completely
force
blind.
stuff.
Yeah, that was in Sith Lords. So that was Knights of the Old Republic too.
That was it. And like I can remember playing this part and finding it because I think this girl appears in your spaceship and she's trying to kill you, but you
Yep.
become friends, or you choose to kill her or be friends with her. I was a Jedi back then. As I said, I'm fallen now, but with that, it was just like wow, there's somebody who's blind in there, and
But she's
it's
empowered by it, isn't she? She's like, yes, I'm
yeah,
blind, but I'm stronger than you. And she keeps going on about it, doesn't it? She's stronger than
oh
you and she'll
yeah.
whoop your ass.
I think by the time I finished actually that dialogue of that scene, it was like my finger was so sore because it's almost like these games. It's like what do you call that role play games
Yeah.
where you make decisions, and you end up becoming a good Jedi or a bad Jedi. We know what way future went anyway. I was being told, but I think that to see that representation and to play a game or to think about this galaxy far, far away and see yourself, that's designed for me. I wouldn't have to say I need help or can you tell me what this is and that white what is the word when somebody kind of just brushes you off when I say I need help, I can't see this. Oh, look harder, or if it's not there I said stop.
Yeah. They just
No, I can't
disregard you.
see.
Yeah.
100%.
And you just say, no, I can't see, but I will whoop your ass if you do
Uh,
anything wrong with me.
I will go on Twitter. I will find your CEO. I will find your manager. And it's funny. I'm actually saying that because we've obviously been trying to edit a podcast, and we've had kind of a little bit of challenge with that. And it was because I ordered a laptop, and it didn't come for like 2 weeks. And I ordered this weeks ago, and they kept canceling it. But we got a new laptop coming tomorrow to edit. So I think for me, I'm just like I know how to find your manager. I will find you on Twitter, and it won't be the first time that I've went after a company who haven't been accessible. I know that's not a direct accessibility, but that same principle applies because we have to fight so hard. We will take it to Karen
Everything.
level 100.
I mean, people would call it a Karen, but Jesus Christ, disabled people sometimes have to be a bloody Karen because
Sorry, Karens.
we're not getting what we need. But in the Star Wars universe, the technology's just there. You don't have to call a CEO. You wouldn't have to go, oh, hang on, you haven't got your new data pad. Sorry, Mr. Darth Vader, I haven't got my data pad. Do you mind sending it? You know, you wouldn't do that. It's just immediately there, right? And there's so much to learn from the sci-fi world. Not just Star. I mean, I'm a massive Stargate fan as well, and there was so much representation in Stargate as well, especially with mental health. Like with Star Wars, a lot of mental health represented in ways that were good and bad. But
It's sci-fi. It's sci-fi, though, as you said. It's
yeah,
almost that. People see people who enjoy sci-fi. Oh, you're a nerd, you're a geek. But there's no names for people who like horror movies, or there's no people who like comedy. Do you know what I mean? It's
yeah,
people who like sci-fi use nerds and geeks. So it's not different. You're different to everybody else. So do you know what? If you want to see polar representation in sci-fi movies and say we're different, bloody right, we'll be different. We'll be the rainbow sheep in that field, and we will look fabulous being those sheep.
exactly.
Bye.
Because in the sci-fi world, disability is represented so strongly. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Quite a lot of the times they are the bad guy, but quite a lot of the times they're the good guy. I mean, especially in Star Trek, there is a guy called Georgie LaForge who is blind, isn't he?
Mhm.
And he
Yep.
wears this visor on his. It's in Next Generation, so we're talking about the early '90s here. I can't remember what his name is now, but he does Reading Rainbow. Can't remember the actor's name, but he's really really famous. And he was, he played a blind person, and you think, well, why didn't they just fix his eyesight? I said, well, that's not the point. It wasn't the point of fixing his eyesight. There was nothing, there was nothing to fix. You can't fix it, but he had this technology to be able to see. It wasn't just a case of just rip out his eyeballs and put new ones in. It's like, no, he was blind, but he had assistive technology to help him. So it's that representation that I think people are like, oh well, if you had a chance to get fixed, wouldn't you? And at the moment, there's this new, what I would call sci-fi thing coming in the medical world, which is fixing spinal injuries, and it means that you can walk again. Well, in theory, that's amazing, especially if you're just new to your spinal injury and you don't have leg atrophy. I can't say that word right. We did do a public health warning that we're going to get words wrong, didn't we?
We did
Um,
indeed.
if you're like a friend of mine who's had cancer since birth and his legs have not worked for 40 odd years, no amount of you fixing the spine is going to be able to make you walk because there's no muscles in the legs. And this is another thing with scientists making these wheelchairs that can go upstairs. I'm like, well, that's great, but how the hell am I going to get that into my car? How the hell am I going to get that into my house? And also, how the hell am I going to afford it? You know,
And
why are you creating these thousands of pounds worth of equipment like the spinal injury fix, whatever? I think it's like a thing that you implant into your spine to get the nerves working. So that's just a massive operation to begin with, and then you've got this thing in your body that can go wrong at any. Anyway, it's a whole thing. But it's these scientists creating these different things when all they had to do was just build a bloody ramp,
that's it. That's what I was
which
going to say.
which would cost
Why are we
so much less.
why are we thinking of, oh, look, we need to go outside the box and make this brand new super flying wheelchair? Yeah, well, let's just cement the steps and you do that, because yes, you're going to make this wheelchair. Who can afford it? Let's go with that. Is this going to be a wheelchair that you're going to target at people who can afford it? Because let's be real, when we think about the number of disabled people who are unemployed, there's more disabled people unemployed than there is in
So
employment
how are they
with
going to afford it?
non-disabilities. Like, so how are we affording this? And then if you look at regions like the US where you have to pay for your healthcare, how like even insulin over there is absolutely insane, the
Yeah,
price of it. Like, how are they affording it, and how are we getting it here? Like, it's just insane when the easiest solution is design. Think about the
look at the
disabled
design.
community when you're designing those buildings.
And there's like ocular implants, isn't there, that they're trialing to? And I mean,
Oh,
we've already got like uh, oh
hearing aids.
no, not hearing aids, but the implant to go right into your head. I can't remember what it's called now.
Do you know, I think I know
Um,
what you're talking about. I was asked years ago by a doctor, when I was younger, he asked my mum, because I used to go to that clinic, he asked my mum, could I come in and do, it's almost like a trial thing, an experiment,
hmm.
where they would insert something into my inside of my ear, behind my ear, And with my nystagmus, when my eyes shaked, it would shock me. So they offered shock therapy essentially to try with this experiment they were doing. And like I'm going back to like the 90s, early 2000s when this happened, showing my age here. And with that, like that's insane. Like shock therapy was used years ago in,
Mental
you know,
health.
really, yeah. And like even the name that you used to give the institutions, it's disgusting. It's almost this horrible, nasty thing, and it's like let's cause pain to fix this person who's already emotionally in pain. So that little experiment you're talking about, when I hear things like this, it
Yeah.
kind of makes my skin crawl because I'm like, I was a kid and you wanted to use me as a guinea pig.
Yeah, and that's the thing, we're meant to be a progressive society, and yet we're like, oh, let's implant something into someone's head. Yeah, I mean, the hearing implants do work for people that want them, but I know a lot of the deaf community don't like that. And yes, there are implants to help with epilepsy that do work, and that's fine. And there's a lot of implants that may help with Tourette's as well, which doesn't always work. But at the end of the day, that's never shown in sci-fi.
No.
You're never shown being fixed in. Well, obviously there are sci-fi movies that do that, but in Star Wars and Star Trek and Stargate, there's not really anything to fix someone. It's like, well, have this new piece of kit, and it's going to make your life better, rather than let's try and fix the thing that's gone wrong with you. And that's what people don't understand. Like you say, people think like people like us, so we're like freaks or geeks or incels or people that are just weird that like live in our mother's basements. Where actually we're the most progressive of people because we've lived in a world for like nearly. I mean, if we go right back to Metropolis, which is the first sci-fi movie ever made in like, was it in the 1900s? I don't know where it was. With robots. I mean, I think 1920s, but like, we've been living this world where anything is possible, and they don't try and change you. They try to make life better. I mean, and the case in point is, I keep going back to it, the Death Star. It was totally accessible, completely accessible. 100%
And it's
accessible, and we can't even. I mean, I used to tell people that I couldn't even get into my dentist. I couldn't get into my dentist because it was upstairs. And I've not been able to get into MRI units because they're in those porta cabins that are up staircases, and I can't have breast screening because they're in those porta cabins up staircases. And it's things like that. It's like, we've got all these medical marvels, and you're trying to implant things into us, and yet you're not changing the most simple things that have been in the sci-fi world for the last nearly 100 years, which are ramps
and it's because
and
it's
assistive technology. It's just amazing.
It's because historically, again, it's been non-disabled people telling disabled people what we need to make us be able to access something. Oh, you have a disability. We're going to put a ramp here for you, but you're not going to be able to go up the second building because we don't have lifts. But you can work at the first floor. Oh, we have no toilet. You can't work here. Sorry. Do you know? It doesn't work. And that's not my example because obviously I don't use the chair. I have my eyesight, so I do. For me, my accessibility comes from accessible technologies and getting larger monitors. Like I always tell people, I'm like, and it's, when we're talking about sci-fi, I'm almost like in a spaceship deck because I have my laptop, I have my two screens,
Yeah,
I have this robotic arm that pulls back and forth for me, almost like the same one I have for my podcast mic,
yeah,
and then I have all these little gadgets and gizmos, but it's those little pieces of assistive technology that are helping me. But even some of them, I sometimes think, oh, this isn't that great. And a recent one, a talk I had was actually with a company called Text Help, and they offer this technology. Firstly, was to do with schools. It was kind of for people with learning difficulties, and then it moved on to employment and helping people with employment. And initially, this design was started for people with learning difficulties. It can now be used for people with visual impairments like myself, or a whole range of different disability, or even people without disability. It can actually help you do your day to day.
yeah,
So they've designed something that is for 1%, but everybody else can use. And again, back to that design for 1%. But it's kind of like if Star Wars can get it so right in a galaxy far, far away, why aren't we getting it right now, right
yeah.
here in the right here and now?
And we could talk about this forever, and I think we need to wrap it up because otherwise we will talk about it forever. But I hope people have learned a little bit of something, even if you've not
Yeah.
seen any Star Wars or any sci-fi, how much the representation matters. And I mean, thinking outside the box doesn't necessarily mean that you need to change the disability. You just need to change the environment. So, with that, we're going to have a little rant of the week. So, Jamie, what's your rant?
I have a good one this week. So my rant this week is one of the things that bugs me is in shops is pricing.
Ah,
So, and I don't know about anybody else, but with my personal permit, when I'm out and about shopping and I'm looking at pricing, I need help. That's not happening. Sometimes I'll use my phone, but one thing that's starting to really bug me is people looking at me when I'm using my phone out in public. It's almost like, oh, what is he
ah.
doing? Even if I'm texting, it's like I don't even have my phone near me, but I do. I'd be like this, and no matter how big my phone is or how many times you tell me, you can zoom in on your phone. It's yeah, I've done it for myself. Trust me.
Yeah.
So I'll use my phone to zoom things. So my biggest ask is, if you have a colleague, or if you have a friend, or if you see somebody out in public, don't look at them and automatically think, "Oh, that person must be drunk because they can't see the phone," or what's the need to think outside the box to see.
Yeah.
What's your
Oh,
rant?
my rant is a little bit off of that. So when I tell people I can't read or write, they look at me and then they start slowing down their speech. Like I've had a perfect conversation with them at a perfect speed, um, to the extent where sometimes I've bamboozled them with words. And the minute they hand me something or a form to fill in, I go, sorry, I can't read or write. Could you fill that in for me? They slow down as if I'm a child. Um, so
I mean,
first
like,
off,
what is
make
that?
your entire system accessible so people like me can actually fill it in online, especially doctors. Thank you very much. But secondly, if I say I can't read or write, don't start talking to me like I'm a 2-year-old, please,
Exactly.
because I could ring runs around you. Run
I
rings
mean, you nearly
around
got there.
you. There was my dyslexia going totally backwards.
I mean, I'm standing here cheering you on and tongue popping from RuPaul when you're talking.
Oh,
Like, I just want to make one sound to sum up what you've just said for you, and it's my favorite Star Wars sound. It's Chewbacca, and it is.
well, if I was having an asthma attack, I could do a great Darth Vader, but let's not make me have an asthma attack.
Save
Okay.
that for next time.
Let's not do that because then I end up sounding like Muttley, and that's a whole different universe. But anyway, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm Fuchsia. This is Jamie,
And I'm
and
Jamie.
it's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you. Bye now.
Bye.